Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we got a great show for you today. We're going to kind of update you on a conversation we had a little over a week ago, the topic of secession, of whether or not the United States of America is going to face either a de facto or a real civil war, whether states have had enough, and whether it's culminated or will ultimately culminate in some type of secession movement. We're going to talk very seriously about that in just a moment. But before we go any further, we're going to talk seriously about our sponsor, Big Daddy Unlimited, otherwise known as BDU, your Second Amendment headquarters. You can get factory direct pricing on guns, ammunition, stocking stuffers like a Beretta pistol, shotgun shells, rifle shells, scopes, all kind of things directly shipped to you at factory direct pricing. Not only guns and ammo, but swag, tactical gear, literally thousands of items shipped directly to your door. Look above the video no matter where you're watching it, whether it be on Facebook. We're on there Monday through Friday from 8 o'clock Eastern time, or as close as we can get to it. We're also rebroadcast along various social networks, including America's Voice News. Download the free app on your Android or your iPhone. They're on Roku, Fire Stick, Apple TV, Pluto channel, and also channel 219 Dish Network, America's Voice News, a terrific alternative to the mainstream media, and we're on there as a late night show. No matter where you're watching the show or when you're watching it, look above the video and scroll down on that, and you will see our sponsorship link. Take it to Big Daddy Unlimited. We also have a link to PatriotThreads.org. PatriotThreads.org, apparel with a purpose. Check out that website. They can put together charity events or charity fundraising, selling patriotic themed t-shirts for you and other apparel. Check it out. You get a 20% discount by using the promo code JMT, John Martin Talks. Check it out. We also are excited to announce that we are now have a new channel on YouTube as part of Recoil TV, the YouTube channel Recoil TV. Check it out. John Martin Talks now has a channel on that, and that is everything you could possibly imagine on the issues of Second Amendment, from actual political issues to actually demonstrations of how to use equipment and the cutting edge technology that is tied into anything to do with the Second Amendment. Recoil TV is a place to go, and we now have a channel on there, and they have archived tens, if not hundreds, of our shows, so check it out. All right, we're going to get right into this. It's an article out of Politico. What all the secession talk really means, and this is by a person named Casey Michelle. I don't know this person, don't know really anything about their politics. I can tell you that if they're writing a Politico, they're probably pretty liberal. But it's about secession, and the person you see pictured there is none other than Colonel Allen West. He used to live actually in Florida, was a congressman from Florida. He is now the head of the Republican Party in the great state of Texas, and he has been talking now about Texas and others possibly joining in a secession movement, and it is for real. Trust me, anything that Allen West says, I mean, I may joke around. Allen West, man, he is about as serious as they come, and if he's talking about it, it is definitely for real. But this Casey Michelle has written an opinion piece. Let's see what they have to say. As MAGA world's hopes for an election redo have slipped away, they're talking about Donald Trump's chances of becoming president again, slipping away. An equally improbable idea has begun to percolate among Donald Trump's most bitterly disappointed followers: secession. Well, let me answer that. Let me address that. Bitterly disappointed followers. I don't think that Trump supporters, by and large, are bitter. Angry, yes. Disappointed, disheartened, maybe. All of those things. But bitter does not describe anybody really that is part of the MAGA agenda that I've seen. I'm not saying individuals, But as it might not be, but as a whole, I can tell you, if you go to a Trump rally, it is literally a love fest. Donald Trump is going to have a rally very soon again in Georgia, maybe more than one, for the Perdue and Loeffler, those runoff races there. And I can guarantee you it will not be bitter. I mean, I've been to Trump rallies. I've seen them, the ones he had just after the election, and they're not bitter. One thing about Trump supporters in general, we're not a glum lot. We're not a bitter lot. A disappointed? Yes. A determined, which is what I think they're trying to get out here. Somebody like Alan West is a determined person. I've met Mr. West a couple of times, and I would never describe that man as bitter. It also here, when they talk about the Trump loss, this secession is not about whether or not Donald Trump wins or loses. Because Donald Trump, we all know this, he was going to serve 1 or 2 terms. That's it, right? Now, we believe, many of us believe, that it was cheated out of him this last and that he did win. A lot of people believe that. But it's not about whether Donald Trump won or lost, contrary to what the media, they just don't get it. It's the way he lost. Yes, we feel like, a lot of us, I shouldn't say we, but a lot of us feel like that Donald Trump won by every standard you could possibly imagine. That yes, Mr. Biden may have won the ballot chase, but I don't know about the voter chase. The bigger problem is the way this has been handled since then. There's been no real investigation. Let me just ask you this, snowflakes that are listening out there, you trollers that are constantly trolling, they're back now. Welcome. Glad to have you back. Share it with your friends. I don't care who watches the program. Matter of fact, the more the merrier. But let me just ask you this. If the shoe were reversed, if it were flipped the other way, and we know this because remember Hillary Clinton said that Joe Biden should not concede no matter what before the election. And now they're saying, Donald Trump. I saw a headline that says Donald Trump should resign now. That kind of thing. He hadn't even served out his term. Resign now. If the roles were reversed, how many investigations you think Congress under Nancy Pelosi would be calling for in this election? If Donald Trump had won by the greatest amount in the history of the presidency, what do you think would have been happening? So I think if you answer that honestly, you know that I'm right about that. Texas GOP Chair Alan West, we just showed you a picture of, floated the idea of a new union of law-abiding states. Think about that, law-abiding states. He means people that actually obey the law. Now, that could be pretty blanket coverage there. I think what he's talking about, certainly he's talking about election law, which was clearly violated. The state of Texas sued, and we'll get into that more in just a minute. But they sued because they said the election laws in those swing states was violated. And no one really disputes that if you stop and think about it, because the Constitution is very specific about election laws at the state level, because we don't really have a national election for president. We have roughly, in a sense, 50 separate state elections. So the states control that. The only thing the Constitution is pretty specific about is that whatever election laws are governed in a state, they can only be adopted and are changed by the legislative body, not the court systems, not the Secretary of State, not the governors, but by the legislative body. And clearly across America, when it came to what I would call cheat by mail, that wasn't done. There were multiple, not just in those swing states like Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and the states that were in that lawsuit, but multiple states changed their election law outside of the legislative process. Thus, they're unconstitutional and what? Unlawful. But I think, and I don't pretend to speak for him, but I think Mr. West is making a larger point here when he talks about the idea of law-abiding states. Because we've seen over the past year now that states have allowed people to loot and pillage and destroy and just tear places apart, shutdowns that don't seem to be constitutional, that kind of thing. So there are multiple things that are happening in these United States of America that certainly are not law-abiding, certainly to someone like Alan West's caliber. And Texas State Representative Kyle Betterman, we talked about him in the show last week, pledged to file a bill in Austin to put the question of Texas secession to voters. Representative Randy Weber also posted pro-secession material on his Facebook page, becoming the first official in Washington to advocate for disintegrating the U.S. Trump's most reliable media supporters have likewise spread the idea nationally. So let me ask you, ladies and gentlemen, given what has happened in this country, is it any wonder that there are people questioning whether or not we're still following the Constitution? Think about the SCOTUS decision. There were two decisions that were made by the Supreme Court in the last couple of months that really show that they're not paying much attention to the Constitution. Just because you're a Supreme Court judge does not necessarily mean that you're abiding by the Constitution, because they're rendering their opinion. And guess what? Their opinion could be wrong. But the two decisions I'm talking about, one of them was before Amy Barron Cohen got on the court. Shortly after Ms. Ginsburg passed, there was a case that came up in the state of Pennsylvania. And here's the crucial thing. It was before the voting had taken place. And basically, the case was brought up that essentially said that Pennsylvania was violating the Constitution because they made changes to absentee balloting, cheat by mail, when it came to signatures and how long after the election day, like 3 days later, they could be counted, various things like that. It was challenged to the Supreme Court level, and Justice John Roberts, who is not a friend to conservatives, I'll just put it politely, he sided with the left side of the court, and they did not take up the case. So what that meant was it went back down to the lower court, which was the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, and so they basically punted it. They didn't take the case in that sense. And that was a chance to actually make changes before people voted. So that was one case. Then you fast forward to just this past week, basically, after Amy Coney Barrett, which many of us, including myself, had tremendous high hopes for, and still do, but I got to tell you, I'm disappointed right now, when the Supreme Court refused to actually take up the trial, and that's what it would have been, a trial when there was a suit by Texas, and I believe it was 18 other states, including my great state here of Florida, that joined with them in suit against, I think it was Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Those states basically saying, and I think rightfully so, that they violated their own state election laws. And the Supreme Court is supposed to take up that case when it's state against state. The Constitution actually grants them the right to have the trial there. And the Supreme Court didn't even hear a lick of evidence in the case. They didn't. They listened to some arguments. Basically, they looked at the suit that was brought by Texas and the other states. They looked at the response that came from the states in question, and they said, we're not even going to hold a trial. So, excuse me, I say all that to say this. The problem is much bigger than whether or not Donald Trump actually won the election. The problem that many people like myself have, and I believe these people that are talking about secession, is they're not getting their grievances addressed at the court level. It's one thing to have a case and to lose. You lose cases all the time. But to not even have the Supreme Court give you the benefit of the doubt and look at the evidence is a slap in the face of places like Texas and Florida and the others that joined it. And a lot of people are, as the old movie used to say, they're mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore. So if you believe all of that, then what is the most logical choice to have? Isn't secession one of them? Excuse me. Isn't secession a potential? I just got through playing. If I look a little bit tired, it's because I had a busy day yesterday. I played Santa Claus for like 3 hours at our local convenience store, or not convenience store, at our local shopping market, and I was flooded because people are hungry for Santa Claus right now, and they wore me down. But it's a good worn out nonetheless. But secession is absolutely a logical conclusion. And people just don't want to accept that logic. Thank God for Texas had the cojones. They talk about media personalities. Let's name a few. Rush Limbaugh, recent recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Anytime I say Rush's name, I want to pray for Rush, man. He certainly deserves it. Medal of Freedom this month claimed the country was suddenly trending towards secession. Fellow arch conspiracist Glenn Beck, I like how they, so he's an arch conspiracist just because he agrees with Rush Limbaugh, echoed the argument a few days later, as did I on this show. As did a raft of blue check authoritarians. American militias have now begun picking up the scent. So now the militias are kicking in. One just the other day argued all conservative states to join together to secede. Now, isn't it interesting that when something like this happens, they're quick to label everybody with the militia title? So I don't know anything about which militia they don't mention. It doesn't really matter to me. But I'll assume for the sake of the article that some militia group did say something about secession. But what gets me is the Hollywood elites, just to give you an example, they can turn around and say, hey, if Donald Trump gets reelected, I'm leaving the country. I'm getting out of here. I'm taking my toys and I'm going home. Or I'm going to a new home. They can threaten to leave. And these are people that society as a whole, whether they should or not, I don't know if they look up to them. They certainly know who they are, like the Oprah Winfreys of the world, the Whoopi Goldbergs and whatnot. And they say they can leave, and they're treated like heroes for talking about abandoning the greatest nation on earth. But if you question the government, it's treason, right? It's just crazy. And then, just to give you an example, I played this last week, but I want to play it again. This is a video of one of these elites, Donnie Deutsch, I'd call him something that rhymes with that, on MSNBC, he's a regular on Morning Joe. And listen, I want you to listen to what he calls basically the type of people, like an Allen West, probably throw me in there as well. Anybody who basically supports Donald Trump is what he's talking about. Listen to what he has to say about 50 million Americans. Check it out.
To go.
Donnie, it's almost eerie to hear someone talk like that. We are so starved of this sort of language of grief and loss.
What are the traits of a leader? It's three things. It's honesty, it's empathy, and it's having a vision. It's an honesty to confront a problem and say, we have a problem, and here's the loss, here's the problem. The empathy is the most important part. And I understand and I can feel it. I feel you. And you feel that from him. And the third part is having a vision about how we're going to solve the problem. Here's the problem. In one of your earlier segments, you were showing a crowd at a Trump rally or anti-coronavirus rally. And somebody held up a sign that said, 99% survival rate is not an emergency, which that's the mindset of somebody. If you were in a movie theater with 100 people and one person was going to die, the other 99 shouldn't care, shouldn't huddle around it. And that's the
I think there's an ad in this we got to get through. I'm sorry.
problem in this country is that we have a part of this country called the ungreatest generation that is a me culture. And if it doesn't affect me, I don't give a damn. I mean, that sign said it all. And that's the problem. Even if you have Biden's leadership and it has those three traits, if you have a huge part of this population, and we do, and I see the sadness in your face today, Nicole. You look like you're going to cry. I feel the same way. And what it comes down to is that certain people can't be led. If you have enough people who just don't give a damn unless it affects them, it's hard to solve that problem. And we have a segment that is the ungreatest generation, and that's the sadness that we have here. That can't look at that number of 3,000 and go, those are people. They can't process it. If it doesn't affect them, they can't process it. And that's sad.
But I can't imagine being in a movie theater, Donnie, and if one person started choking, everybody wouldn't get up and call 911. Like, I just refuse to believe that that's who we are. I think there's a chunk of the country that's been fed lies, and I'm not taking out the responsibility for believing the lies and being attracted to the lies. I know a lot of people who are high on the lies, myself in my own life. But I refuse to believe that we can't be led, at least some of us, to a somewhat brighter place. It is the absence of any forum for feeling the loss. Go ahead.
But maybe we have to get to a point that maybe there are 50 million jerks in this country. Maybe that's the sad truth. And how do we manage that? Because Joe Biden is doing everything right. And when you see that sign and you see, maybe there's a chunk of us that really suck as human beings. Maybe that's a reality.
50 million people. There you go. A little convoluted getting to it. Apologize for that. 50 million people that basically suck. Well, you know who he's talking about, right? He's talking about you MAGA hat wearing sons of guns, you dreg society, you Trump chumps like me, and my psychic sidekick, Billy Bob here. He's got a Twitter handle, by the way. It's at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks. But Donnie Deutsch, and I'm trying to be kind here, says that 50 million of us basically just suck. And I played you a tape, I think it was yesterday, where we played that tape again where Joe Biden basically says, you know, about 15% of Americans are just bad people, which coincidentally is about 50 million as well. So if you're out there, you know, think about what they've called us, basket of plurals, dregs to society, mostly just bad people. 50 million people just suck. Well, if that's how you feel about us, why don't you actually, and I'm not America love it or leave it, I'm saying if America's so bad, if it's the land of the suck people, like you saying, Donnie Deutsch, why don't you and Whoopi Goldberg and the rest of y'all actually carry out your threat and adios amigos? I mean, it just pisses me off. This next paragraph I'm going to read you, it alone is enough to secede from the Union. And let me just back up before we get any deeper. I'm not advocating any of this. I'm trying to explain it, Facebook, algorithm people, fact checkers, you know, you people. I'm not advocating violence. I'm simply trying to get you to get what's happening, to actually take a real look at the frustrations in America and not just be so dismissive as Donnie Deutschbag says, and just basically say, oh, there's 50 million people just suck. Are they mostly just bad people? To take a minute and actually listen and hear what the frustrations are of real Americans. That's what's happening. But listen to this next paragraph. To me, it's enough to secede on its own. When pushed on their rationale for secession, proponents waffle between unspecified values, hazy nods to cultural differences, and vast democratic conspiracy. Think about that. Unspecified value. I'm going to give you a few specified ones in just a minute. Hazy nods to cultural differences. You either believe in the U.S. Constitution, by the way, or you don't. You either believe in e pluribus unum, out of, you know, one nation under God, out of the many one, or you don't. You either believe in rugged individualism, which this country was founded on, or you don't. You either believe that we have inalienable, in other words, God-given rights that can't be taken away by government, or you don't. You either believe that the Constitution was set up to protect the rights of the individual against the overreach of a big government, or you don't. And we can agree and disagree on a lot of things, but if you don't agree on those fundamental, and those aren't hazy, by the way, inalienable rights aren't hazy, freedom of speech isn't hazy, the Second Amendment, by God, is not hazy. It's only hazy, for instance, when the media makes it so. When you have people like Andrew Cuomo talking about you don't need more than 7 shots to kill a deer, and in reference to the Second Amendment. I hate to tell you snowflakes out there, the Second Amendment is not about deer hunting. And this has nothing to do with that. It's about defending yourself against the tyranny of the majority, in some cases, potentially, or the tyranny of government. That's what our country was founded on. It was founded on protecting the individual's rights. The Second Amendment is not about duck hunting. It's about protecting life, limb, and your personal property, about your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is what the Second Amendment is about. But it has really changed, has it not? When you look at like the McCloskeys out in St. Louis, when they defend their home against hundreds of protesters, and they're charged, even though they defended their home with legal weapons. I mean, that's why you got to check out stuff like Recoil TV. That's why you got to check out our sponsor like Big Daddy Unlimited, man, your Second Amendment headquarters. because the left just simply, it's not that we have a disagreement on the First Amendment or the Second Amendment. They don't believe in it anymore, period. So we better get truly woke and understand it. Matter of fact, I would like to ask some of these progressives, could you please tell me what of the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights as we come to lovingly call it, do you actually believe? Because I can't find any that they actually believe in. But let's get back to this paragraph, because it does, as you can tell, it got me going. When pushed on their rationale for secession, proponents waffle between unspecified values, hazy nods to cultural differences, and vast democratic conspiracy. That means Biden winning. Contrary to, say, the secession crisis of 1860 and 61 led to the Civil War, the current rhetoric doesn't have a single clear propellant other than a hard-to-swallow drubbing at the polls. In other words, Joe Biden cheat by mail. It just really irritates me. Here's some hazy values, okay? You want to talk about some hazy values? Let's look at this hazy value coming from a governor, a Democratic governor, in this case of the great state of Virginia. Here's a value that he's not too hazy on. Let's listen to it. Check it out.
Republican delegate about whether her bill would permit an abortion even as a woman is essentially dilating, ready to give birth. And she answered that it would permit an abortion at that stage of labor. Do you support her measure and explain her answer?
Yeah, and I wasn't there, Julie, and I certainly can't speak for Delegate Tran, but I would tell you, first thing I would say is this is why decisions such as this should be made by providers, physicians, and the mothers and fathers that are involved. There are, when we talk about third trimester abortions, these are done with the consent of obviously the mother, with the consent of the physicians, more than one physician, by the way. And it's done in cases where there may be severe deformities, there may be a fetus that's non-viable. So in this particular example, if a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother. So I think this was really blown out of proportion.
It's not blown out of proportion. What is out of proportion is the lie he just told. What they're talking about in those late third trimester abortions are not just if the life of the mother or the fetus is deformed, whatever. They're talking about a discussion about whether to keep a baby alive after it's been born alive and then abort it. So they're lying about that. So that's a value right there that is not shady and not hazy. You either value life or you don't. It's pretty simple when it comes to that. And then what really pisses me off about it when I think about somebody like this Northam fellow is how Donald Trump has been called everything but a child of God when it comes to race relations, and it's just the opposite. Donald Trump, as I've told you before, is the worst racist ever president because he sucks at it. He's not very good at being it at all. So if he's a racist, he's the worst ever. But Joe Biden started his campaign on a lie, accepted the nomination on a lie, that one about good people on both sides. The media knew it was a lie. Donald Trump said there are good people on both sides of the statue removal issue. He condemned white supremacists, Nazis, straight up, period. So the whole thing is a lie. But they want to accuse Donald Trump of something that did not happen. But then when it comes to somebody like this Ralph Northam, let's show this thing from his medical school, not grammar school, medical school yearbook, where he can't remember whether he was the one in the clucker outfit or the blackface, and that is no big deal. Can you imagine for 1 second if there was a picture and Donald Trump said, well, yeah, I can't remember if I was wearing the Ku Klux Klan outfit or the blackface. Oh, my Lord. They would have burned the White House down to get him out of it. But Northam right now is still governor of Virginia. I mean, so it just pisses me off, man. And here's the thing, too. The amount of baloney or malarkey, as Joe Biden would say, for you to believe that there is no corruption whatsoever. I mean, think about this, ladies and gentlemen. I've said this before, but if I say it, it bears repeating. First of all, they want you to believe that if I came up to you on November 2nd, the day before the election, and said that tomorrow Donald Trump will get the most votes, 10 million more than he did in 2016, the most votes in the history of a sitting president, you told me there's no way impossible that he could lose. So you have to buy that. Then secondly, you'd have to buy that somehow miraculously Joe Biden is the greatest candidate in the history of the world, let alone the presidency, because he spent his whole time in his basement, got more votes than anybody running for president in history, got more black Americans to come out in places they didn't even come out for under Obama. You have to believe all of that to sit there and say, there's no evidence of corruption anywhere. So what really has people like me edgy is not because we want to secede from the Union. No, that's not it at all. It's because there's no investigation of stuff that we care about. You know, look what all has happened. Donald Trump was impeached, for God's sakes, for something that Joe Biden actually did. And they elected him to be president. The Democrats say he's the greatest candidate in the history of the world. Think about that for a minute. Donald Trump was impeached for what Joe Biden actually did. Quid pro Joe. And yet we're supposed to just go, oh, nothing to see here, move along. Yeah, we accept it with a joyful heart. You know, turn the other cheek and smack us on that one. That's what they want from us. It ain't happening. Richard Kreitner, author of Break It Up, a recent book on the history of American disunionism, I guess seceding, said, there won't be a secession push right now. It's not the second secession winner. The political fractures, as extreme as they are, don't match state borders, but instead pop up in every state along the rural-urban axis. Now, I would agree with him on one point. There are people from all over this country that are pretty fed up with what's happening, and they exercise that by showing Donald Trump. But I think he's wrong about a map of secession, because I can show you a map that we talked about yesterday. We talked about this vaccine. This is a vaccine. This is the map of where those states that are in blue are where they are deciding. There, if you hadn't seen yesterday's show, you need to go back and take a look at about the vaccine, because it's just crazy. Those states in blue have decided that they're going to give out the vaccine, and one of the primary things they're going to base it on is skin color, race. Michigan even went so far to say what language you speak. Nothing to do with science whatsoever, having to do with diversity. And diversity, I've come to believe, means non-white. That's what diversity means. It just means non-white. So there's a map right there. Let's start with those red states right there. They look like a good group to secede. It's about half the nation, right? I think if you actually look at it, those are probably very comparable to states that Trump won versus states that Biden won. And then, of course, if you want to see how widespread this is, kind of like what the article alluded to, here is the county map of the blue wave that just took place in 2020. Look at that. There's your blue wave, ladies and gentlemen. It basically is the seaboard states, or not even the states, but the cities in that. Look at California. It's about half gray. Look at, I mean, it's just amazing if you stop and look at where Donald Trump won versus Joe Biden. Basically, Donald Trump won the entire country, save for the major American cities. No wonder they want to do away with the Electoral College, but they call themselves the Constitutionalists. And we that want to actually go by the Electoral College are the renegades. It's interesting. When Alan West fantasizes about this article about Texas values and the like, he is summoning a non-existent picture of a singular Texas identity. God bless Texas. University of Texas law professor Sanford Levinson, noted for his writing on secession and the Constitution, he said, he told me, this is the guy that wrote the piece, not only is Texas now firmly a swing state, really? In what universe? Texas was overwhelming for President Trump and is still very much a red state. Is it something to be concerned about? Certainly. Is it a swing state? No, not yet. It could be. Not only is Texas now firmly a swing state territory, with all its major cities now Democratic. Well, heck, all the major cities are. But the state that produced more Trump voters than any other was deep blue California. Think about that. They're admitting that California produced the greatest number of Trump voters of any other state outside of Texas. They ought to be worried about California becoming a potential swing state. But see, people, what's happening, I don't see having an armed secession right now. I don't see it. I'm not advocating for it. I have not advocated for it, just so you understand. I'm just talking about the feelings, the emotions, and the actual evidence and what they're basing their decisions on. People are seceding right now with their feet, so to speak. And if it's up to Ocasio-Cortez, they literally will, because they'll be seceding like with the Flintstones car. But people are moving away from California and New York in droves. The people from California are mostly coming to Texas, and the people from New York, there's Ocasio-Cortez right there. That's what she'd have us all driving. But the people from New York are coming to Florida. The only thing I say to them going to Texas and Florida and places like that, don't bring your politics with you, the things you're running from. But people are running away from these blue states and these blue cities in droves. So there is already a certain secession now. And what I think is more likely to happen is you're going to see more and more states exercise, and there's going to be more challenges in the Constitution, not to necessarily secede, but to assert states' rights and basically say that we have a right to determine whether we shut down or not. You're not going to tell us we have to shut down. Because look at Texas and Florida right now are booming. Florida's job rate's going through the roof. California is crumbling. New York is falling apart. So most people want to actually work and be productive. So those people are coming to places like Texas and Florida. So I think people are going to secede to a certain extent by their feet. And this is what, by the way, the big holdup was on the stimulus bill that could literally pass as we're speaking, supposedly, is that the states want a big bailout for their fiscal irresponsibility, and Republicans are saying no. That was a big holdup. Back to this article. The writer says, all of which is to say actual secession in the U.S. remains for the moment something outside the realm of feasibility. That's probably true. But that misses the point about what is really driving the threats. Whether they acknowledge it or not, the proponents of severing centuries-old bonds don't necessarily want to break away. Well, won't, I hate to tell you, sir, has little to do with it. It's not about want. The Constitution is being ignored. If you listen, there's a thread of all these different talks, whether it's secession or state rights or however you want to put it. People feel like their Constitution is being ignored, that even the Supreme Court of the United States of America is ignoring their constitutional duties. So what redress do you have? Well, there's a solution for that as well, and we'll get into it in a minute. And then this writer says something really interesting. It says, who wants the financial, talking about why he doesn't think secession will actually happen, who wants the financial implosion and massive outflow of capital that will come with actual independence anyway? Well, this guy or gal, I don't know which, and I guess the Democrats don't matter, is what I call an educated idiot. Because they really believe that states that are talking about seceding, like Texas, are hurting economically compared to places like New York that are wanting more bloated federal government help. It's just the opposite of what this person is saying. They don't get it. The states that are failing are the ones that are blue states. That's why Joe Biden said, I want to talk about blue states or red states. These United States of America. Well, some of us, Joe, want to talk about the difference between living in Florida and living in New York. And a lot of New Yorkers want to talk about that too, but they want to talk about it while they're vacationing down in Disney. They don't want to talk about it in the freezing cold of the open air restaurant in New York during a blizzard, sir. It's crazy. But that's why they want the stimulus for the bailout. That's why the holdout. So this writer is way, in my opinion, off base with this idea that states like Texas and Florida pulling away would be an economic disaster for them. Texas especially. Texas, man, if Texas actually successfully seceded and became an independent country now, I would predict they'd become one of the wealthiest nations on the planet. I mean, look at the natural resources they have. they would be the buffer between the United States, Mexico, South America. I mean, Texas, it would be a major financial boom for Texas, I believe, if they actually left. It'd be hurting the rest of us. So I'm not advocating this, I'm just explaining it. Instead, they are using secession, talking about these states and proponents of it, secession as a kind of rhetorical cover for an opposition strategy that has erupted periodically throughout American history. Now, they go into a long diatribe of various secession movements from the Tea Party right on down. I'm not going to get into all that. Read the article yourself. It's pretty interesting, but I'm just going to give you the highlights. It said, back to this, said, a opposition strategy that has erupted periodically throughout American history. Rampant they're talking about people who are proposing secessionism. Rampant obstructionism and even outright nullification. Seriously? You're seriously talking about people like Adam West, people I guess like me, that are, what does the article say? Rampant obstructionism and even outright nullification. Really? Now this is really, I'm just going to play you one video of a currently reelected, in this case, member of the House from the night they first became a Democratic member of Congress. And the first thing they said at their acceptance speech was this right here.
And you win. And when your son looks at you and says, Mama, look, you won, bullies don't win. And I said, baby, they don't. Because we're going to go in there, we're going to impeach the motherfucker.
So before she even gets sworn into office, she's saying in her official acceptance, basically, of her election, that they're going to impeach the MF for talking about Donald Trump. Yet we, or Alan Wests of the world, are the obstructionists and nullification. Impeachment itself was a nullification attempt of a duly elected president of the United States of America. And they were talking about impeaching Donald Trump right up until Election Day. And believe me, if the shoe were on the other foot, they'd be talking about impeaching him right now. And if he actually pulls this off on January 6th, which is the day it looks like it might happen, they're going to be talking about impeaching him before he ever takes office again, right? So, I mean, these people know no shame, man. I mean, right now you have Biden's deputy chief of staff calling all Republicans a bunch of effers. I guess she takes her kind of cue from Rashida Tlaib there. But rampant obstructionism and even outright nullification, when that is, one thing about these progressives, these Democrats, the progressives taking over the Democratic Party, all you got to do is listen to what they say and believe what they say. Because if they're accusing you of something, it's because they're doing it themselves. That's a fact. This isn't a replay, back to the writer here. This isn't a replay of the rise of the Confederacy in 1861 as much as it is the birth of the Tea Party in 2009, a grinding war of attrition fought from outside the government using legislative lethal weapon of no. Just say no. Are you listening, Georgia? Are you listening? Are you listening? Because that's what, Georgia, you're voting for the entire nation in January. I think it's January 5th, is it not? There's already voting taking place in Georgia right now. How the vote goes in Georgia will determine whether we can say no or not. And it is going to be big, because if it gets to the point that we can't say no, think about it. The SCOTUS, even though we caught hell trying to get Republicans up there, and they stabbed Trump in the back. They stabbed the states in the back because they didn't even take up. My problem with the Supreme Court is they didn't even look at the evidence, which was their constitutional duty to do. Donald Trump, I'll get back to Georgia real quick. The only thing I need to know about Georgia is that Donald Trump said that you should vote in Georgia for the 2 Republican senators. I don't trust too many people in D.C. I trust Donald Trump. He said, get out and vote. That's good enough for me. I also trust, as I've been telling you, you're new to the show. First of all, howdy, how are you? Where you been? You're in the right place now. But I've been telling you, I trust another person. I trust Chuck Schumer without question. I trust that he will do exactly what he says he's going to do in this video right here. Check it out.
Now we take Georgia, and then we change the world. Yeah! I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Mr. Schumer? Now we take Georgia, and then we change America.
I trust that he's going to do that. Let me just cut to the chase on this because I'm about out of time and I want to get this out. You know, they talk about secession. I mentioned this last week, but I think it bears repeating. The Constitution, it may have been settled because they quote Anton Scalia saying here that the Civil War, if it settled one thing and one thing only, it is that there is no right to secede. I'm not one to question the great judge. But there is another document out there, and it is a founding document. Yes, as someone pointed out to me, it has no legal bearing, but it started the greatest country the world has ever known, and that's called the Declaration of Independence. It says here about the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It goes on, I'm starting right in the middle. It says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. In other words, we in the United States of America give the United States government the permission to govern us. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. This is what our country was founded on, and to institute new government laying its foundation on such principles and organizing powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their own safety and happiness. Now, the swamp don't want to be drained. It doesn't want to be drained. So let me just sum it up by telling you this. If people want to live under a U.S. Constitution, if we want to actually live under a republic form of government, not a democracy, that's not what we've never been at. But if we want to be a rugged individualist with God-given rights, inalienable rights, protected, not bestowed upon by the Constitution, then what choice do we have if everywhere we turn we get no redress for our grievances? That's what happened with the Declaration of Independence. They tried to negotiate with King George and got nowhere. And I'm just telling you, I'll close with this. This is what people who are talking about secession, they don't want to go to war. Nobody wants to go to, most people that are patriots, they want to go and spend time with their families like I hope you will over Christmas. Merry Christmas to you. We're not going to have a show, by the way, on Thursday and Friday. So remember that. We'll be back Monday, Lord willing. But when you have no other redress of your grievances, then maybe we got to go the right of a Declaration of Independence and basically not give the consent for us to be governed. I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, and share it with others. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. Let's all pray for this great nation and our president. They both have earned that right. But like I say to you each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.